Good morning. This is Garry Glaub in Mooresville, North Carolina. Today we are in Lesson 32 of the Gospel of Luke, and we're covering Luke chapter 13, verses 1 through 17. This one's called the Barren Fig Tree. In a desert landscape, there are only three uses for a fruit tree: fruit, shade, or firewood. But as there are typically larger non-fruit-bearing trees for shade, a fruit tree without fruit seems a bit useless. There were two trees in the Garden of Eden, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Both of these were fruit-bearing trees, and man's trouble began at that time. Satan, the serpent, coerced Eve to break God's rule and eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. God instructed Adam and Eve that they could eat of any tree but that one, but if they ate of that fruit, they would die. That action was sin, and they brought sin into the world. And because of that sin, both Adam and Eve would physically die. The New Jerusalem will not have two trees, but only one, the tree of life. It will grow on both sides of the river of the water of life, and when it comes to fruit, this tree will produce 12 different kinds of fruit and will bear fruit 12 months a year. I don't think we will pass the time in heaven by months and years, but the tree of life will bear fruit always. Our eternal lives, which were interrupted by physical death because of sin, will be restored. Let's read the first passage today. Luke chapter 13, verses 1 through 5 says this: There were present at that season some who told him about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices. And Jesus answered and said to them, Do you suppose that these Galileans were worse sinners than all other Galileans, because they suffered such things? I tell you, no. But unless you repent, you will all likewise perish. Or those 18 on whom the tower in Siloam fell and killed them, do you think that they were worse sinners than all other men who dwelt in Jerusalem? I tell you, no. But unless you repent, you will all likewise perish. There's some unexplained information in this passage that is not mentioned in any other place in the Bible, nor does the Jewish historian Josephus mention it. Jesus says that Pontius Pilate mingled the blood of some Galileans with their sacrifices. It sounds like some Jews came from Galilee to make sacrifices at the temple. Historically, we do know that Pilate quickly addressed any Jewish insurrection and was heavy-handed. It sounds like Pilate had these Galileans killed, and the blood of the sacrifice was mixed together with their own blood. But regardless of how it happened or what happened, Jesus had a more important point to make. We are not to draw conclusions or even correlations concerning God's reasons for allowing difficulties to occur. This reminds me of one of the healings performed by Jesus, when he healed a man who had been blind since birth. The disciples asked Jesus if it was the sin of this man that had caused his blindness or the sin of the parents. The disciples only gave Jesus two choices. Talk about oversimplification. And one of those choices would have been punishment for a sin that he had committed while in his mother's womb, as he had been blind since birth. Jesus said it was neither, but he was blind for this moment when Jesus would heal him. Once again, we prefer to assign our works to everything. We think that we either earn reward or punishment by our actions, with no middle ground. Don't forget, if we received what we earned, we all would be killed. All sin, any sin, is punishable by death by a righteous, sinless God. But God gave us a different option through his grace. Jesus taught many times that this life will not be easy, even if we are his. But if we are his, we have the gift of his peace and a future without pain, sadness, or sin. John 16:33 says this: These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. What is worse to endure, tribulation or the great tribulation? Jesus mentioned another event where a tower in Siloam fell on 18 men and killed them. Were those 18 men worse than the rest of the sinners in Jerusalem or Israel? The common consensus for those not understanding God and God's ways was that those people had been punished by God for their sin. The friends of Job made the same conclusion when Job was enduring extreme difficulties, accusing Job of bringing everything on himself through sin. The mention of Siloam should remind us of the healing by Jesus of the man who was blind since birth, discussed earlier. Siloam, as most will remember, means sent in Hebrew, and is an area just outside the city walls of Jerusalem. It is where Hezekiah's tunnel ends, at the pools of Siloam. Jesus spat on clay, placed it on this blind man's eyes, and instructed him to find his way to the pools of Siloam. He was sent. There he could wash off the clay and see again. Certainly that was a journey of faith. Having walked the uneven pavement from the city walls of Jerusalem to the pools of Siloam with my eyes open, I can tell you that this journey by that man demonstrated his belief and his desire to see. We tend to focus on why bad things happen to good people rather than questioning why good things happen to bad people. Who are the bad people? Well, all of us are sinners with desperately wicked hearts. We are deceitful at best. Unbelievers tend to blame God for everything, thinking that because he is good, he should step in and stop anything that is difficult. Does anyone catch the irony? A God who they don't believe exists should do what they think he should do. Who is God in this story? Would it be the people who require God to appease them, or the all-powerful Creator? If God does not exist, how can he step in? These people want God to step in and stop evil, stop pain, and stop death, but to leave them alone and allow them to do whatever they want. God is capable of stopping all evil, but for those who do not believe in him or follow him, what would be the point? They have chosen evil rather than God by their free will. In addition, we don't see all the consequences of an action or event as God does. Many things we would think to be negative are more beneficial than we ever could imagine. Notice that Jesus did not come to show us how to live our lives without pain. He poured that pain upon himself, dying on a cross. Jesus demonstrated his willingness by enduring more pain than us, and gave us the ability of heaven where there will be no pain. Let's read the next passage. Luke chapter 13, verses 6 through 9 says this. He also spoke this parable. A certain man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came seeking fruit on it and found none. Then he said to the keeper of his vineyard, Look, for 3 years I have come seeking fruit on this fig tree and find none. Cut it down. Why does it use up the ground? But he answered and said to him, Sir, let it alone this year also, until I dig around it and fertilize it, and if it bears fruit, well, but if not, after that you can cut it down. Often, when a fig tree is mentioned in the Bible, it is symbolic of Israel, and this seems to be one of those passages. This is a fig tree without fruit. Notice that the tree has been barren for 3 years. By the law of Moses, the fruit on a tree was not to be eaten immediately. In fact, for the first 3 years, the fruit was not to be eaten by anyone. In the 4th year, all the fruit was for the Lord. Not until the 5th year, after a fruit tree had been planted, could the fruit be harvested and eaten. This man wants to cut the fig tree down, but the keeper suggests that he fertilize around the tree. Give it more time, and if it still does not bear fruit, then it will be time to cut it down. If the fig tree is Israel, we can see that the keeper is God. God did everything for Israel, but Israel still did not bear fruit. Finally, God sent the Messiah to fertilize this nation, and still it bore no fruit. The next step in this parable was the destruction of the fig tree. This occurred in 70 AD when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem and the temple, killed many Jews, enslaved many others, and some escaped to the four corners of the world. Isaiah told them this would happen. Isaiah chapter 5 verses 1 through 7 says this: "Now let me sing to my well-beloved a song of my beloved regarding his vineyard. My well-beloved has a vineyard on a very fruitful hill. He dug it up and cleared out its stones and planted it with the choicest vine. He built a tower in its midst and also made a winepress in it. So he expected it to bring forth good grapes, but it brought forth wild grapes. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge, please, between me and my vineyard. What more could have been done to my vineyard that I have not done in it? Why then, when I expected it to bring forth good grapes, did it bring forth wild grapes? And now, please let me tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will take away its hedge, and it shall be burned, and break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down. I will lay it waste. It shall not be pruned or dug, but there shall come up briars and thorns. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain on it. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are his pleasant plant. He looked for justice, but behold, oppression, for righteousness, but behold, a cry for help." As Christians, what makes us think that God will punish Israel and the Jews this way and not punish Christians who are not demonstrating the fruit of the Spirit? Let's read the next passage. Luke chapter 13, verses 10 through 17 says this: "Now he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and behold, there was a woman who had a spirit of infirmity 18 years, and was bent over and could in no way raise herself up. But when Jesus saw her, he called her to him and said to her, 'Woman, you are loosed from your infirmity.' And he laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight and glorified God. But the ruler of the synagogue answered with indignation, because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath. And he said to the crowd, 'There are 6 days on which men ought to work. Therefore come and be healed on them, and not on the Sabbath day.' The Lord then answered him and said, 'Hypocrite, does not each one of you on the Sabbath loose his ox or donkey from the stall and lead it away to water it? So ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has bound, think of it, for 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath?' And when he said these things, all his adversaries were put to shame, and all the multitude rejoiced for all the glorious things that were done by him." It is easy to see that the law had become way more important to the Jewish religious authorities than either the giver of the law or the reason for the law. This woman had suffered for 18 years. Rather than becoming reclusive and bitter, notice where she was on the Sabbath. Her faith in God remained. We also should understand that she did not come to the synagogue that day expecting to be healed, nor expecting to meet Jesus. But Jesus had a blessing in mind. Rulers of the synagogues might have been administrative leaders rather than experts of the law. We have one other Bible passage describing a ruler of the synagogue, and it was Jairus, a father who came to Jesus asking him to heal his dying daughter. By the time Jesus arrived at the house of Jairus in Capernaum, his daughter was dead, and Jesus resurrected her. That occurred in Luke 8, before this description of another ruler of a synagogue in Luke 13. Certainly this had to be a different town, a different synagogue, and a different synagogue ruler, as Jairus was still rejoicing. Sadly, the synagogue ruler in this passage is offended that Jesus would dare to heal on the Sabbath. I wonder if he would have killed his wife if she dared to give birth on the Sabbath. After all, it is called labor. This bitter man told the infirm woman that she could have come to be healed on any of the other 6 days. She did not come to be healed. She came to worship. After 18 years of dealing with this extreme infirmity that caused her to be completely bent over where she could not straighten up, imagine the difficulty it must have been to walk to the synagogue. She came to worship God, not to blame God or to be healed. Jesus tells us that she had been bound by Satan for 18 years. We don't know why, nor do we need to know why. We know that many rejoiced that day, but it sounds like a bitter synagogue ruler remained bitter and went home that night thinking that he was right and Jesus was wrong, and he had no sympathy or empathy for what she had endured. He was another perfect example of the barren fig tree in the nation of Israel. As believers, God desires for us to be fruit-bearing as well. Paul tells us this in Galatians 5, verses 22 through 26. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no law. And those who are Christ's have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another. Notice that fruit is singular, not plural. If we have the fruit of the Spirit, we have all of these attributes. When we lose control, we are walking in the flesh. When we are unkind, we are walking in the flesh. God desires for us to be fruit-bearing all the time, like the tree of life in the New Jerusalem. But we are still sinners saved by grace. When we fail, though, we should continue in our attempt to handle that situation better the next time and walk in the Spirit, not in the flesh. This is Garry Glaub in Mooresville, North Carolina. Have a blessed day.